The champagne tasted like failure on my tongue. Expensive failure, but failure nonetheless. I smoothed the wrinkles of my emerald dress. Purchased secondhand, but carefully selected to look as if it belonged among the sea of designer labels surrounding me. The glass ballroom of the Bellamy Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers, their light catching on diamond earrings and platinum wedding bands. Every surface gleamed with wealth that felt almost offensive in its abundance. I wasn't supposed to be alone at my cousin Eliza's wedding. The empty chair beside me, the one where Daniel should have been sitting, seemed to grow larger with each passing minute, a physical manifestation of my humiliation. 3 days ago, he'd called to explain in careful, rehearsed words that he wasn't ready for something so serious as attending a family wedding together. Translation: he'd found someone better. "Table 17 looks a bit quiet," my aunt had announced loudly during the reception lineup, her eyes lingering on the empty place setting beside me. "Perhaps we should move some people around." The pity in her voice made my cheeks burn. I'd insisted everything was fine, that I preferred the extra space, but everyone knew the truth. I was the family disappointment, 28, recently laid off from my editorial assistant position at a publishing house that was restructuring and now publicly abandoned. I took another sip of champagne and winced at the string quartet's rendition of a love song that had been playing constantly on the radio when Daniel and I first met. The universe had a particular talent for cruelty tonight. "Another drink for the lady in green," I heard someone instruct a passing waiter. The voice was low, textured like expensive whiskey, smooth but with an underlying burn. I turned, expecting to find one of my uncle's business associates taking pity on me. Instead, my breath caught in my throat. He didn't belong here, that was my first thought. Not because he looked out of place, quite the opposite. His black suit was clearly tailored specifically for his tall frame, the subtle sheen of the fabric suggesting a price tag that would cover my rent for several months. His dark hair was precisely cut, just long enough on top to suggest a hint of rebellion against convention. He appeared to be in his early 30s, with features that seemed crafted specifically to make women forget their own names: strong jawline, straight nose, and lips that curved slightly at one corner, suggesting he knew exactly the effect he had on people. No, he didn't belong here because he carried something the other polished guests didn't, an unmistakable aura of danger. It clung to him like expensive cologne, invisible, but impossible to ignore. While everyone else in the ballroom seemed determined to be seen, he gave the impression of a man accustomed to watching from shadows. 2 men stood at a careful distance behind him, their eyes constantly surveying the room, hands positioned in a way that suggested weapons concealed beneath their jackets. One spoke quietly into an earpiece, his gaze never settling in one place for too long. The stranger moved with the grace of a predator, pulling out the empty chair beside me without asking permission. As he sat down, I caught his scent: sandalwood and something darker, unidentifiable. "You shouldn't drink alone," he said, his accent hinting at Italian heritage beneath perfect English. "It invites the wrong kind of attention." I straightened my spine, clutching my champagne flute like a shield. "I'm not drinking alone. I'm at a wedding with 150 people. His smile didn't reach his eyes, a deep brown that appeared almost black in the dimmed reception lighting. Those eyes assessed me with unsettling thoroughness, as if cataloging every detail from my carefully curled hair to the small scuff on my second-hand heels. "Yet somehow you're the only one truly alone in this room," he observed, accepting a glass from the waiter who had materialized beside us with remarkable speed. "It's interesting." "Interesting isn't the word I'd choose," I replied, hating how my voice betrayed my discomfort. His attention shifted to the dance floor where my cousin swirled in her designer gown, diamonds catching light at her throat, a gift from her investment banker husband. "Family." I nodded, wondering why I was even engaging with him. "My cousin. And your date?" His eyes returned to me, unnervingly direct. "The one who left this empty seat?" The question felt like fingers pressing against a bruise. "Decided we weren't serious enough for a family wedding." "His mistake," he said simply, as if stating an objective fact rather than offering comfort. Before I could respond, I spotted my aunt making her way toward our table, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. The last thing I needed was her interrogation about my mysterious companion. I'd endured enough pitying glances for one evening. The stranger followed my gaze, seeming to read the situation instantly. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Pretend I'm your date tonight," he whispered, his voice so low I almost missed the words. I turned to him, startled by the proximity of his face to mine. "Excuse me? Your family feels sorry for you," he stated bluntly. I dislike watching people being pitied. It's undignified. The way he said the word suggested there were few greater sins in his world than a lack of dignity. "I have business to conduct here anyway. This arrangement would benefit us both." "Business? At my cousin's wedding?" I asked, immediately suspicious. His expression remained impassive. "Nothing that need concern you. I don't even know your name," I protested, though part of me was already considering his bizarre offer. The thought of facing my family's sympathy for the remainder of the evening was almost unbearable. "Alessio," he provided, offering nothing more. My aunt was now only 3 tables away, her trajectory clear. The choice crystallized: endure hours of thinly veiled concern and matchmaking suggestions from relatives, or accept this strange alliance with a man who radiated both danger and protection in equal measure. "Emma," I offered in return, making my decision. "My name is Emma Sullivan." Alessio's hand found the small of my back as my aunt arrived. His touch light but possessive, as if we'd known each other for months rather than minutes. The warmth of his palm seeped through the thin fabric of my dress. "There you are, darling," he said, his voice transforming into something warmer. Though his eyes retained their vigilant quality, I was just telling Emma how stunning the bride looks. He addressed my aunt smoothly. "You must be very proud." My aunt's concern melted into delighted surprise. "Oh, Emma didn't mention she was bringing someone." Her eyes darted between us, hunger for gossip evident. "And you are?" "Alessio Ricci," he supplied, standing to take her hand with old-world courtesy that seemed both practiced and natural. "A pleasure to meet Emma's family at last." The lie rolled off his tongue with such conviction that even I almost believed we had a shared history. My aunt practically glowed with relief that her niece wasn't a complete social failure after all. "How wonderful! And how did you two meet?" she pressed, settling into the questioning I'd dreaded. I froze, but Alessio's hand squeezed my shoulder gently, a silent instruction to follow his lead. "The symphony," he answered before I could speak. Emma was alone, much like tonight, before I intervened. She was reading program notes for Tchaikovsky's violin concerto with such concentration. He glanced down at me with convincing affection. I found her fascinating immediately. The lie was perfect, specific enough to sound genuine, but vague enough that my aunt couldn't question details. It also aligned with my known interests. I'd always loved classical music, a passion few of my dates had shared. "Oh, how romantic," my aunt sighed, thoroughly charmed. "Well, I'll leave you two alone. Emma, you simply must bring Alessio to Sunday dinner next month." As she bustled away to spread the news of my mysterious boyfriend, I turned to Alessio. "The symphony? Really? You have calluses on your fingers consistent with playing violin, though not recently," he observed. "Your posture when the quartet played Mendelssohn suggested formal training. It seemed plausible." I stared at him, unnerved by how accurately he'd read me. I had played violin throughout school and college before financial reality forced me to sell my instrument. "Are you always this observant?" "Yes," he answered simply, taking a sip of his champagne. His eyes continued to survey the room over the rim of his glass, occasionally making subtle eye contact with the men I now recognized as his security. The wedding reception continued around us, but I became increasingly aware that Alessio wasn't the only one watching our table. Men in similar dark suits appeared at various points around the perimeter of the ballroom, their attention carefully divided between their surroundings and Alessio himself. "Why are you really here?" I asked quietly, as the music swelled and couples filled the dance floor. Alessio's expression remained neutral. "The father of the groom owes me something." "Nothing that will disrupt your cousin's special day?" he added, correctly interpreting my alarmed expression. "Owes you what?" I pressed, uncomfortable with the implications. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, I glimpsed something cold and immovable behind them. Everyone owes something to someone, Emma. The difference is, I collect what's mine. The champagne turned sour in my stomach as understanding dawned. The subtle deference of the waitstaff, the careful distance other guests maintained from our table despite their curious glances, the security personnel positioned throughout the venue, all pointed to one conclusion. I wasn't sitting with just any businessman. Before I could respond, the father of the groom himself approached our table. Martin Wells was a prominent real estate developer, whose name adorned half the new buildings in the downtown area. He was smiling, but as he drew closer, I could see the slight tremble in his hands, the thin sheen of sweat on his forehead, despite the perfectly cooled ballroom. "Mr. Ricci," he greeted, his voice overly jovial. "What an unexpected pleasure. I didn't realize you'd be attending." "I never miss celebrating important family occasions," Alessio replied, emphasis subtle but unmistakable on the word family. "Your son seems happy. It would be a shame for anything to change that." Martin's smile faltered for just a second. "Of course. Perhaps we could speak privately?" "After the cake," Alessio decided, dismissing him with nothing more than a slight nod. "Tonight is for celebration, isn't it, Emma?" Trapped in a web I didn't understand, I nodded automatically. Martin's eyes flicked to me with something like sympathy before he retreated, immediately intercepted by one of Alessio's men, who guided him smoothly away from the bar he'd been heading toward. "What are you?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Alessio turned to me, amusement flickering across his features. "Currently, I'm your date, remember?" He stood, extending his hand. "And as your date, I believe I owe you a dance." I hesitated, suddenly aware that accepting his hand meant stepping further into whatever dangerous reality surrounded him, but the alternative, sitting alone at the table while speculation swirled around us, seemed worse. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine with surprising gentleness as he led me to the dance floor. The crowd parted subtly before us, conversations pausing momentarily as we passed. When he drew me into his arms, his hand at my waist was proprietary, maintaining a proper distance while somehow suggesting intimacy. "You dance well," he observed as we moved to the music. "Another part of your classical training?" "My mother insisted," I replied automatically, concentrating on the mechanical aspects of dancing to distract from the unsettling awareness of his proximity. "She believed it was an essential skill for a proper young lady." "Your mother was right," he said, guiding me through a turn with practiced ease. "Too many people neglect the traditional arts these days." As we moved across the floor, I became increasingly conscious of his security team repositioning themselves, maintaining clear sightlines to Alessio at all times. Other guests glanced our way with poorly concealed curiosity. "Everyone's staring at us," I murmured, uncomfortable under the scrutiny. "They're staring at you," he corrected, his voice dropping lower. "Wondering why you've caught my attention." What makes Emma Sullivan special enough for Alessio Ricci to claim as his? The possessive edge in his voice sent a confusing mix of warning and warmth through me. "You haven't claimed anything," I countered, trying to maintain some sense of control in a situation rapidly slipping beyond my understanding. His hand tightened slightly at my waist, drawing me a fraction closer. "Haven't I?" he questioned, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it difficult to breathe. "You accepted my offer. In my world, agreements are binding, Emma." The song ended, but he didn't release me immediately, his gaze holding me in place as effectively as his hands had. When he finally stepped back, his fingers trailed along my arm, leaving a path of goosebumps in their wake. "I need to speak with Martin now," he said. "Wait for me at our table. Don't wander." It wasn't a request. As he walked away, one of his security personnel shifted position to maintain a clear view of me. I returned to our table, legs unsteady, mind racing. I'd made a terrible mistake. Whatever game Alessio was playing, I'd unwittingly become a piece on his board. I considered leaving, making some excuse to my family and slipping out before Alessio returned. But as I reached for my clutch, I noticed one of his men watching me, his attention unwavering. The message was clear. My agreement to be Alessio's date for the evening was indeed binding, whether I liked it or not. 20 minutes later, Alessio returned, satisfaction evident in the relaxed set of his shoulders. He sat beside me, closer than before, his thigh pressing against mine beneath the tablecloth. "Everything is settled," he stated, signaling for fresh champagne. "Martin and I have come to an understanding." "What kind of understanding?" I asked, unable to curb my curiosity despite my better judgment. Alessio studied me for a moment. "The mutually beneficial kind." He offered nothing more, clearly considering the matter closed. The evening progressed with Alessio playing the role of attentive date with surprising conviction. He engaged my relatives in conversation, remembered details about their lives I'd mentioned in passing, and kept his hand possessively at the small of my back whenever we stood together. To anyone watching, we appeared to be a couple deeply comfortable with each other. Only I could feel the underlying current of control in his touch. The subtle way he positioned himself between me and any approaching men, the calculating assessment behind each seemingly casual interaction. He was performing a role, but the power he wielded was entirely real. As the reception drew to a close, my cousin tossing her bouquet to a crowd of eager bridesmaids, Alessio leaned close to my ear. "It's time to leave," he said, his breath warm against my skin. "I've enjoyed our arrangement more than expected." Relief washed over me. The charade was ending. I could return to my apartment, lock the door, and pretend this strange evening had never happened. "Thank you for your help," I said formally, gathering my clutch. "I appreciate you saving me from my family's pity." His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "You misunderstand, Emma. The evening is ending, but our arrangement isn't." My heart stuttered in my chest. "What do you mean?" "You introduced me to your family as your boyfriend," he stated, as if explaining something simple to a child. "That makes you mine now, at least in their eyes. To suddenly disappear would raise questions, for both of us." "That's ridiculous," I protested, keeping my voice low as nearby guests collected their belongings. "We can say it didn't work out. People break up all the time." "Not from me," he said, the words carrying absolute certainty. "Besides, your family seemed very pleased, particularly your aunt. It would be unkind to disappoint them so quickly." Fear and indignation battled within me. "You can't be serious." His eyes met mine, any pretense of warmth now absent. "I'm always serious, Emma. My car is waiting outside. I'll take you home." The statement carried such authority that I found myself following him toward the exit before fully processing my compliance. His security formed a subtle perimeter around us as we moved through the crowd, ensuring no one delayed our departure. Outside, a sleek black car with tinted windows idled at the curb, a driver standing at attention beside the rear door. As we approached, he opened it with a respectful nod to Alessio. Reality crashed back, breaking through the surreal quality of the evening. I couldn't get into that car. Whatever Alessio was, and I had increasingly dark suspicions, I needed to extract myself from his orbit immediately. "I can call a taxi," I said, stopping a few feet from the vehicle. "Thank you again for tonight." Alessio turned to me, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. "Emma," he said, my name somehow sounding like both a caress and a warning on his lips. "Don't make me insist." The implied threat hung in the air between us. My mind raced through options, all leading to the same conclusion. I had no choice but to play along until I could safely distance myself from him. With a pounding heart, I stepped toward the waiting car, acutely aware I was crossing a threshold that extended far beyond the physical act of entering a vehicle. As Alessio slid in beside me, his thigh once again pressed against mine in the spacious back seat, I realized with perfect clarity that my impulsive decision to accept his offer had consequences I was only beginning to understand. The door closed with a soft, decisive click, sealing me into Alessio's world as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. Whatever came next, one thing was certain. My life had irrevocably changed the moment he'd whispered, "Pretend I'm your date tonight." The car moved through the city like a ghost, silent and untouchable. Despite the spacious leather interior, I felt claustrophobic, hyper-aware of Alessio's presence beside me. He wasn't looking at me but out the tinted window, his profile sharp against the passing city lights. "Your address?" he asked finally, breaking the heavy silence. I hesitated, suddenly reluctant to give this man, this stranger who had insinuated himself into my life with disturbing ease, access to where I lived. "Madison Heights Apartments," I said after a pause, purposely omitting my unit number. "On Westfield Avenue." Alessio didn't look at me as he relayed the information to his driver, but a slight curve touched his lips, suggesting he'd noted my omission and found it amusing. "Apartment 3B, he added, causing my blood to freeze. The building with the broken security camera in the east stairwell. Fear, cold and electric, shot through me. "How do you—" "I make it my business to know things, Emma," he interrupted, finally turning those dark eyes toward me, "especially about people who interest me." The implications were staggering. He'd known who I was before approaching me at the wedding. This hadn't been a chance encounter, or an impulsive decision to save me from embarrassment. He'd planned it. "Why?" I managed, the single word encompassing the chaos of questions swirling through my mind. Why me? Why the elaborate charade? What could he possibly want from someone like me? "The right question," he acknowledged with approval, though perhaps premature. His hand moved across the seat, not touching me, but coming to rest close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The message was clear. He could touch me if he wanted to. The space between us existed only by his choice. "I've been watching you for some time," he continued, his voice matter of fact, as if admitting to stalking was perfectly normal. "You're different from the women who usually catch my eye." "How flattering," I muttered, sarcasm born of fear making me reckless. His expression hardened momentarily before smoothing back into careful neutrality. "Careful, Emma. I appreciate spirit, but disrespect is something else entirely." The warning hung in the air between us, and I swallowed hard, instinct telling me to tread carefully. "I don't understand what you want from me." "Understanding will come with time," he replied cryptically. "For now, all you need to know is that you'll continue to be my girlfriend in the eyes of your family and the public. We'll be seen together. You'll accompany me to certain events. In private, we can negotiate the exact nature of our relationship." The clinical way he outlined this arrangement made my skin crawl. "And if I refuse?" Alessio studied me, his gaze traveling slowly over my face as if memorizing each feature. "You won't," he said simply. "Your family's joy at seeing you with someone successful was evident tonight. Your precarious financial situation would benefit from the right connections. And," he paused, his voice dropping lower, "you're curious about me." I opened my mouth to deny it, but the lie wouldn't come. Despite the fear and outrage churning inside me, there was something else, a treacherous fascination with this dangerous man who saw too much. The car slowed, pulling smoothly to the curb outside my apartment building. Through the window, I could see the familiar facade, the faded brick, the window boxes with their struggling plants, the security door with its peeling paint. It looked smaller somehow, shabbier when viewed from within Alessio's sleek, armored world. "Tomorrow night," he said, not a question, but a statement. "I'll send a car at 7. Wear something appropriate for an upscale restaurant." The presumption stunned me back into resistance. "I have plans tomorrow." "Cancel them." His tone brooked no argument. "Unless you'd prefer I come inside with you tonight to discuss our arrangement more thoroughly." The threat lingered, wrapped in smooth civility but unmistakable. I reached for the door handle, desperate to escape the confining space and his overwhelming presence. "The driver will open your door," Alessio said, a hint of amusement in his voice at my obvious eagerness to flee. As if on cue, the driver appeared, pulling open the door and offering his hand to help me out. I ignored the assistance, stepping onto the sidewalk on unsteady legs. Before I could move toward my building, Alessio emerged from the car behind me, his height casting me in shadow. "One more thing," he said, reaching into his jacket. I tensed, but he merely produced a slim black phone, offering it to me. "Take this. I'll contact you on it. Keep it with you at all times." I stared at the device, understanding its significance. This wasn't just a phone. It was a tether, a means of control, A way for him to track me. I have my own phone, I protested weakly, which is currently in your clutch with less than 10% battery remaining. He countered. This one is more reliable. Reluctantly, I took it, the sleek device heavy with implications in my hand. 7 tomorrow, he repeated, his fingers brushing mine deliberately as he released the phone. Don't make me come looking for you, Emma. I would find you, but neither of us would enjoy the experience. He stepped back toward the car, then paused. In a gesture that seemed both calculated and strangely genuine, he lifted my free hand and pressed his lips to my knuckles, his eyes never leaving mine. The contact sent an unwelcome jolt of electricity through me. Good night, he said, releasing my hand. Dream of me. I watched as he returned to the car, the driver closing the door behind him with practiced efficiency. Only when the vehicle had disappeared into the night did I allow myself to breathe fully, my legs trembling as I made my way into the building. My apartment felt foreign when I finally closed and locked the door behind me. The familiar furniture, the stack of literary journals on the coffee table, the half-empty mug of yesterday's tea, all seemed to belong to another life. One that had ended the moment Alessio Ricci had claimed the empty seat beside me. I moved through my evening routine mechanically, removing my makeup, hanging up the emerald dress that now seemed tainted by his touch, showering as if I could wash away the memory of his hand at the small of my back. But no matter how hot the water, I couldn't erase the imprint he'd left, not just on my skin but on my life. The black phone sat on my nightstand, ominous in its sleek perfection. I should throw it away, I thought. Change the locks, call the police. But what would I tell them? That a man I'd willingly pretended was my boyfriend now expected me to continue the charade? That I was afraid of him, despite having no evidence he meant me harm? They would do nothing, and Alessio would know I'd tried to escape him. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind replaying every interaction, searching for clues I might have missed. What had Alessio meant about watching me? How long had I been under his surveillance without knowing? The questions chased each other in endless, exhausting circles until dawn began to filter through my curtains. The next morning, I called in sick to the temporary administrative job I'd taken after the publishing house layoffs. The thought of sitting at a desk processing paperwork while this surreal situation unfolded seemed impossible. Instead, I spent hours researching, hunched over my laptop at my small kitchen table, searching for any information about Alessio Ricci. The results were both illuminating and strategically incomplete. Alessio appeared in society pages and business publications as the CEO of Ricci Holdings, a company with interests in real estate, shipping, and private equity. There were mentions of charitable donations, appearances at galas, and business acquisitions. On the surface, a successful, if intensely private businessman, but there were gaps, inconsistencies that raised more questions than answers. No personal details, no interviews, no social media presence. His company's website listed impressive holdings but vague operational details. The few photographs showed the same controlled expression I'd witnessed last night, revealing nothing while suggesting dangerous depths. In one image, he stood beside the mayor at a hospital fundraiser, his hand resting lightly on the politician's shoulder, in a gesture that seemed friendly, but, knowing what I now suspected about Alessio, struck me as proprietary. The mayor's smile appeared strained, his eyes not quite meeting the camera. By mid-afternoon, I'd gathered enough circumstantial evidence to confirm my suspicions. Alessio Ricci's legitimate business interests served as a carefully constructed facade for something much darker. The pattern of businesses that changed ownership after financial difficulties, the strategic charitable contributions to police foundations, the properties in neighborhoods known for organized crime activity, all pointed to the conclusion I'd been avoiding since he first sat beside me. I was entangled with a man who, at the very least, had significant connections to organized crime. At worst, he was what my instincts had whispered from the beginning, a mafia boss who had, for reasons I couldn't fathom, decided I belonged to him. The black phone chimed at precisely 3 o'clock. Startling me from my grim research. A message appeared on the screen. Your dress will arrive by 5. Be ready at 7. No signature, no greeting, no acknowledgement that I might have plans or preferences of my own. The presumption ignited a flare of defiance. I began typing a response about my perfectly adequate wardrobe when a second message appeared. The blue would suit your eyes better than the green from last night. Trust me. The message sent a chill down my spine. Not just because he seemed to anticipate my resistance, but because it confirmed he'd been observing me long enough to know my eye color. I set the phone down without responding, unsure whether he could see my typing in real time. True to his word, at 5 o'clock precisely, my building's intercom buzzed. The delivery man handed over a large box bearing the name of a boutique I'd passed often, but never dared enter. The kind of place where prices weren't displayed because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, lay a midnight blue dress of such exquisite craftsmanship that I gasped despite myself. The silk was heavy and fluid, the cut both modest and somehow sensual in its simplicity. Beneath it lay a smaller box containing delicate silver jewelry and a pair of heels in exactly my size. The invasion, for that's what it was, this uninvited intervention into my private life, this assumption of control over how I presented myself, should have filled me only with outrage. Instead, I found myself running my fingers over the silk, imagining how it would feel against my skin, wondering what Alessio's expression would be when he saw me in it. This dangerous curiosity terrified me more than the gifts themselves. At 6:50, after hours of internal debate, I stood before my mirror in Alessio's selections. The dress fit as if made for me, skimming my curves without clinging, the color making my pale skin luminous and, as he'd predicted, bringing out the blue of my eyes. The woman in the reflection was a stranger, poised, elegant, and unmistakably marked as belonging to someone powerful. The intercom buzzed at exactly 7. Not Alessio himself, but his driver, waiting to escort me to the waiting car. Last chance, I thought, staring at my reflection. I could refuse to go downstairs. I could call the police, despite my earlier misgivings. I could flee out the back exit, disappear, start over somewhere new. But even as these possibilities flashed through my mind, I knew they were illusions. Alessio had found me once. He would find me again. And something else kept me from running. Something I was reluctant to examine too closely. That treacherous curiosity about what awaited me in his world. The car that delivered me to the restaurant was the same as last night, but Alessio wasn't inside. Instead, I was driven alone through the city to an exclusive restaurant in the historic district, the kind with no sign outside and a waiting list months long. The maitre d' greeted me by name as I entered, as if I were expected royalty rather than an unemployed editor wearing borrowed finery. "Mr. Ricci is waiting for you," he said, leading me through the dimly lit space where conversations hushed momentarily as I passed. Alessio stood as I approached the private corner table, his eyes moving over me with unhurried appreciation. He wore another impeccably tailored suit, this one a deep charcoal that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. In this setting, the danger he radiated seemed more contained, channeled into a focused intensity that made it impossible to look away from him. "Beautiful," he said simply as I reached the table, the single word carrying more impact than flowery compliments from other men. He moved to pull out my chair himself, rather than allowing the hovering staff to assist, his hand brushing the bare skin of my shoulder as I sat. The brief contact sent warmth cascading down my spine. "The dress fits perfectly," I observed, struggling to keep my voice neutral. "How did you know my size?" "I told you," he replied, taking his seat across from me. "I make it my business to know things about you." A waiter appeared silently at his subtle gesture, pouring wine without offering choices or waiting for approval. I noticed that no menus had been provided. "I've taken the liberty of ordering for us," Alessio explained, correctly interpreting my glance. "Unless you have objections." The question was clearly a test. I took a sip of the wine, a red so smooth and complex it nearly made me close my eyes in pleasure, before answering carefully, "That depends on what you've ordered." A hint of approval flickered in his expression. "Nothing you're allergic to. You have no food restrictions except an aversion to oysters and a preference for rare meat." Again, the evidence of his surveillance was both unnerving and strangely intimate. He knew details about me that casual dates might take weeks to discover. "You've been thorough," I acknowledged, setting down my glass. "Why? What makes me worth this level of attention?" Alessio studied me, his gaze penetrating in the restaurant's soft lighting. Direct questions. I appreciate that. He leaned forward slightly. You remember Thomas Wells, Martin's nephew who was seated at your table last night? I frowned, recalling the quiet young man who had spent most of the reception on his phone. Vaguely. We barely spoke. He noticed you, Alessio continued, something hardening in his voice. In fact, he's been following your career at Pinnacle Publishing with particular interest. Did you know he's on their board of directors? My heart skipped a beat. Pinnacle was the publishing house that had laid me off 3 months ago. No, I didn't. Thomas has problematic interests, Alessio said, his fingers tapping once against the tablecloth before going still. He makes a habit of identifying vulnerable women in his companies. Women who need their jobs, who have no powerful connections to protect them. Understanding began to dawn, cold and clarifying. You're saying he had me fired after you rejected his advances at the company holiday party last December, Alessio confirmed. He arranged for your department's restructuring specifically to eliminate your position. Memory flashed. Thomas introducing himself at the party without mentioning his connection to the board, his hand lingering too long on my waist, his thinly veiled suggestion about getting drinks somewhere quieter. My polite but firm refusal. How do you know this? I asked, though I was beginning to understand how Alessio's world operated through information, leverage, and power carefully applied. Martin's debts to me give me certain access, he replied, his expression darkening. When I discovered what Thomas had done, I became interested in you. The first course arrived, delicate plates of seared scallops arranged like art. I barely noticed their presentation, my mind racing to process what Alessio was revealing. So this is what? Revenge against Thomas? Protection for me? I pressed once the servers had withdrawn. Why not just tell me about his involvement? Because information without power is useless, Alessio said, watching me with that unnervingly direct gaze. Telling you would change nothing, but making you mine. He paused, the possessive word hanging in the air between us. That sends a message no one in this city will misunderstand. A shiver that wasn't entirely fear ran through me. And what message is that? That you're under my protection, he answered simply. That anyone who touches what belongs to me will face consequences. I don't belong to you, I countered, though my voice lacked conviction. One fake date at a wedding doesn't make me your property. Alessio's lips curved in a smile that didn't reach his eyes. We both know it wasn't just one date, Emma. The moment you accepted my offer, you stepped into my world. The question now is not whether you belong to me, but what kind of arrangement we'll have. The directness of his statement stole my breath. Arrangement? I protect what's mine, he continued, cutting into a scallop with precise movements. My protection comes with benefits, financial security, career opportunities, certain luxuries. His eyes flicked to the dress I wore. In return, I expect loyalty, discretion, and your company when I desire it. My cheeks burned at the implication. If you're suggesting I become your mistress, I'm suggesting nothing so crude, he interrupted, his tone sharpening. Mistresses are temporary, disposable. What I'm offering is more permanent. The word hung between us, heavy with significance. I took another sip of wine, buying time to collect my thoughts. Why would you want someone permanent? I asked finally. You could have any woman you wanted, someone from your world, someone who understands the life you lead. Something shifted in his expression, a brief glimpse of something almost vulnerable, before the controlled mask returned. Perhaps that's precisely why I don't want them. You're different, Emma. You see me. Not just what I can provide or the power I wield. I don't even know you, I protested. You know more than you realize, he countered. You recognized what I am the moment I sat beside you. You felt the danger, yet you didn't run. Instead, you challenged me. Do you know how rare that is in my life? To be seen for what I am and not feared into silence or flattered with false admiration? His words resonated with unexpected truth. I had seen something in him, the darkness, yes, but also a complexity, a loneliness perhaps, that mirrored my own. What happens if I say no? I asked quietly, as our plates were cleared. and the main course arrived. Perfectly cooked steak for me, exactly as I preferred it. Alessio considered me for a long moment. Then you walk away tonight. I ensure Thomas faces consequences for his actions against you. Your job at Pinnacle is restored if you want it, and we never see each other again. The offer was surprisingly reasonable, shockingly so. But as I studied him across the table, I realized there was something he wasn't saying. "And?" I prompted. "What's the catch?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You'll spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. Wondering if anyone will ever see you, truly see you, as I do." The accuracy of his assessment struck me like a physical blow. How long had it been since anyone had really seen me? Not the carefully constructed facade I presented to the world, but the woman beneath, with her fears and desires, her strengths and vulnerabilities. "I need time," I said finally, setting down my fork. "This is, overwhelming." "You have until the end of dinner," he replied, unyielding. "Some decisions don't benefit from prolonged deliberation, Emma. This is one of them." We ate in charged silence, the exquisite food almost an afterthought against the weight of the choice before me. Return to my safe, predictable life, now with the job that had been unfairly taken from me, or step willingly into Alessio's dangerous, seductive world. As dessert was served, a delicate chocolate creation I would normally have savored, Alessio reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine in a touch that seemed to burn through my skin. "Your decision?" he asked, his voice low and intimate in the restaurant's hushed atmosphere. I looked into his eyes, searching for some sign that would make my choice clear. What I saw was power and danger, yes, but also something unexpected, a hunger that went beyond the physical, a loneliness that matched the emptiness I'd carried for so long. "If I say yes," I began carefully, "I need to know this isn't just about ownership or control. I won't be a possession, Alessio." His fingers tightened around mine, just short of painful. "You'll be mine," he stated. The words both promise and warning, but never just a possession. "What I want from you can't be taken, only given." In that moment, perched on the edge between two possible futures, I made my choice. One that would reshape my life in ways I couldn't yet imagine. "Yes," I said simply, the single word sealing my fate. Alessio's expression remained controlled, but something flared in his eyes. Satisfaction, triumph, and beneath it all, a relief that suggested he had doubted my answer more than his confident demeanor had indicated. "Then it begins," he said softly, lifting my hand to his lips. Against my skin, he murmured words that sent a shiver of both fear and anticipation through me. "There's no going back now, Emma. You're mine." The weeks that followed unfolded like scenes from someone else's life, opulent, surreal, and governed by rules I was still learning to navigate. Alessio integrated me into his world with calculated precision, introducing me to the public aspects of his life while carefully shielding me from whatever darkness lurked beneath its polished surface. True to his word, I was reinstated at Pinnacle Publishing within days, but with a promotion to junior editor rather than my previous assistant position. The executives who had coldly informed me of my layoff now treated me with nervous deference, their eyes darting away whenever I mentioned Alessio's name. Thomas Wells was conspicuously absent from the board meetings that had once brought him to our offices regularly. When I asked Alessio about it, he merely replied that Thomas had decided to pursue opportunities abroad. His tone made it clear the decision had not been voluntary. My apartment, which had seemed adequate before, was suddenly revealed as shabby through Alessio's eyes. He never criticized it directly, but I noticed the careful way he surveyed the aging appliances. The water stain on the ceiling from the upstairs neighbor's overflowed bathtub, the secondhand furniture I'd collected through years of careful budgeting. "You can't stay here," he announced on his third visit, standing in my small living room with his security team positioned discreetly in the hallway outside. "It's not secure." "It's perfectly fine," I protested, though I'd become uncomfortably aware of the building's deficiencies since entering Alessio's orbit. "The neighborhood is safe enough," his expression darkened. "Your neighbor 2 doors down has been arrested twice for drug possession. The building manager has a gambling problem that puts him in debt to people who would be very interested to learn about your connection to me. And," he added, moving to my window and demonstrating how easily it could be forced open, Anyone with minimal skills could access your bedroom in under 30 seconds. The casual way he listed these threats, as if danger were a constant he navigated daily, sent a chill through me. I can't afford anything better right now, I said defensively. Even with the promotion, Alessio turned from the window, his eyes softening fractionally. You misunderstand me, Emma. I'm not suggesting you find a new apartment. I'm telling you that you're moving in with me. The statement hung in the air between us, breathtaking in its presumption. We've been dating for less than a month, I reminded him, though the word dating hardly captured the strange arrangement we'd established. And in that time, you've become known as mine, he countered, moving closer until I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. That makes you both valuable and vulnerable. I can't protect you properly if you're living here. Protection isn't the only reason you want me under your roof, I challenged, refusing to back away despite his proximity. A smile curved his lips, genuine amusement replacing his usual controlled expression. No, he agreed, lifting a hand to brush a strand of hair from my face, his fingers lingering against my cheek. It's not the only reason. The admission hung between us, charged with the unspoken tension that had been building since our first meeting. Despite the public appearances we'd made together, dinners at exclusive restaurants, a charity gala where I'd been introduced to the city's elite, a weekend at a vineyard owned by one of his associates, Alessio had been surprisingly restrained in his physical demands. His touch was frequent but carefully controlled, a hand at the small of my back, fingers entwined with mine, lips brushing my knuckles or cheek. He'd kissed me properly only once, a brief but searing contact after the gala that had left me breathless and confused by my own response. I'm not ready to live with you, I said finally, stepping back from his touch. This is all happening too fast. Something dangerous flickered in his eyes, but he simply nodded. You have 1 week to prepare. My staff will handle the arrangements. It wasn't a compromise, but a concession. More time, but the outcome already determined. I opened my mouth to protest further, then closed it, recognizing the steel beneath his polite facade. This wasn't a point he would yield. True to his word, exactly 1 week later, I found myself standing in the private elevator ascending to Alessio's penthouse, surrounded by the few personal possessions I'd deemed essential. Everything else had been cataloged and stored by his efficient staff, despite my objections that I could handle my own packing. The elevator opened directly into a foyer larger than my entire apartment, revealing a space that managed to be both imposing and strangely welcoming. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a panoramic view of the city, the late afternoon sun casting golden light across gleaming hardwood floors and custom furniture that balanced masculine elegance with unexpected warmth. Welcome home, Alessio said, appearing from a hallway to my left. He wore casual attire by his standards, tailored trousers, and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled to reveal strong forearms. The sight was oddly intimate, as if I were seeing a private version of him few were allowed to witness. It's beautiful, I admitted, setting down the bag I'd insisted on carrying myself. But it doesn't feel like home yet. It will, he replied with absolute certainty, closing the distance between us. His hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing lightly over my lower lip, in a gesture that sent warmth coursing through me. You belong here, Emma, with me. Before I could respond, he stepped back, gesturing toward the hallway. Let me show you around. The tour revealed a space both larger and more personal than I'd anticipated. Beyond the impressive main rooms designed for entertaining, there were smaller spaces that seemed genuinely lived in. A library with well-worn classics mixed among business texts. A music room with an antique violin displayed in a glass case. A kitchen that, while professionally equipped, showed signs of actual use. You cook? I asked, surprised to find a pot of what smelled like authentic Italian sauce simmering on the stove. When I have time, Alessio confirmed, lifting the lid to stir the contents. My mother insisted all her children learn. She believed a man dependent on others for basic needs was vulnerable. It was the first personal detail he'd shared about his family, and I filed it away carefully. Children? You have siblings? A shadow crossed his face. A sister. Sophia. He offered nothing more, and something in his expression warned against pressing further. The tour culminated at a door at the end of the main hallway. Alessio paused, his hand on the handle. "Your room," he said, pushing it open to reveal a suite that took my breath away. Sunlight streamed through more floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating a space that had clearly been designed with me in mind. The walls were painted a soft blue-gray that reminded me of the ocean on a cloudy day. A king-sized bed dominated one wall, dressed in luxurious linens in shades of cream and pale blue. A reading nook with a comfortable chair and small bookcase occupied one corner, while a desk with a state-of-the-art laptop sat beneath the window. But what truly stunned me were the personal touches, framed first editions of my favorite novels, a violin similar to the one I'd been forced to sell, and on the nightstand, a photograph of my parents on their wedding day. An image I'd kept in a drawer because looking at it had become too painful after their deaths. "How did you—" I began, moving to pick up the photograph with trembling fingers. "As I said, I make it my business to know what matters to you," Alessio replied, watching me closely. "Is it acceptable?" The question contained vulnerability I hadn't expected from him. Despite the invasion of privacy his knowledge represented, I was touched by the effort he'd made to create a space that reflected my tastes, rather than imposing his own. "It's more than acceptable," I admitted, setting down the photograph. "Thank you." Relief flickered briefly across his features, before his usual composed expression returned. "The bathroom is through there," he indicated a door to the right. "My suite is across the hall. While I expect your company for meals and certain events, your time is otherwise your own. You may continue working at Pinnacle. My driver will take you each morning and bring you home." Home. The word hung between us, both promise and constraint. This luxurious cage was to be my home now, beautiful, but ultimately designed to keep me within Alessio's reach. "What about visitors?" I asked, testing the boundaries. "Can I have friends over?" "After they've been vetted," he replied, matter of fact. "Your safety remains my priority, Emma." "My safety or your control?" I challenged, emboldened by the small vulnerability he'd shown earlier. Alessio stepped closer, his expression hardening. "In my world, they are the same thing." His hand captured my wrist, his grip firm but not painful. "Don't mistake my accommodation of your independence for weakness. You agreed to be mine. That means accepting certain limitations for your protection." I met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated despite the rapid beating of my heart. "And don't mistake my presence here for complete surrender, Alessio. I agreed to be yours, not to disappear inside your world." For a moment, tension crackled between us, his fingers tightening fractionally around my wrist. Then, surprisingly, his expression softened into what might have been respect. "Good," he said, releasing me. "I have no interest in a woman without a spine, Emma. Keep your fire. Just remember who you're playing with." With that warning, he left me to settle in, the quiet click of the door behind him both a relief and a strange disappointment. Life with Alessio quickly established its own rhythm, at once structured and unpredictable. I continued my work at Pinnacle, arriving each morning in a car with tinted windows, accompanied by a security detail that waited discreetly outside the building throughout the day. My colleagues watched with barely concealed curiosity, their attitudes shifting from professional caution to outright deference as Alessio's influence in my life became increasingly apparent. Evenings were spent with him, sharing meals he often prepared himself, discussing books or music or art with a depth of knowledge that continually surprised me. These glimpses of the man beneath the dangerous exterior were addictive, each revealed layer drawing me deeper into his world, despite my initial reservations. But there were other evenings, ones where he would return late, his expression closed and hard, sometimes with bruised knuckles or a tightness around his eyes that spoke of violence I never witnessed directly. On those nights, he would drink aged whiskey in silence, his gaze distant until something within him settled, allowing the man I was coming to know to resurface. I never asked about those nights. Some barriers remained unbroken between us, some questions unspoken by mutual, tacit agreement. I lived in his world, but not in its shadows, an arrangement he maintained with careful precision. The physical aspect of our relationship evolved with similar complexity. Alessio's restraint both frustrated and intrigued me, His touches grew more frequent, more intimate, fingers trailing along my spine as he passed behind my chair, lips brushing the sensitive spot below my ear when he greeted me, hands lingering at my waist when he guided me through a room. Each contact seemed designed to test my response, to slowly dismantle my defenses until I found myself anticipating his touch, leaning into it unconsciously. Yet he never pushed further, maintaining an iron control that left me confused by my own increasingly insistent desire. I had entered this arrangement out of necessity and curiosity. I hadn't expected to want him with an intensity that sometimes left me lying awake in my luxurious bed, imagining his hands on me, his body against mine. On the night marking 1 month since I'd moved into his home, Alessio surprised me with dinner on the penthouse's private terrace. The space transformed with strings of delicate lights and candles that flickered in the gentle evening breeze. He'd prepared my favorite meal and selected a wine that complemented it perfectly, his attention to detail both touching and unsettling in its thoroughness. "Are we celebrating something?" I asked, accepting the glass he offered. "Your successful transition," he replied, taking the seat across from me. The candlelight cast shadows across his features, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. "You've adapted to your new circumstances with more grace than I anticipated." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you expect hysteria? Escape attempts?" "I considered them possibilities," he admitted with a slight smile. "You continue to surprise me, Emma. It's refreshing." "I'm glad my captivity amuses you," I said, the word sharper than I'd intended. Alessio's expression hardened. "Is that how you see it? Captivity?" I hesitated, considering the question honestly, despite the circumstances that had brought me here, despite the control he maintained over aspects of my life. I couldn't truthfully say I felt imprisoned. Constrained, yes. Protected, certainly. But also, unexpectedly, valued in a way I had rarely experienced. "I don't know what to call it," I answered finally. "It's not a normal relationship." "No," he agreed, his expression softening slightly. "It's better. More honest than most. I've never pretended to be anything other than what I am, Emma. I've never hidden my expectations or desires from you, except for what you actually do," I countered. "The parts of your life you keep separate from me." Alessio studied me over the rim of his glass. "Would you truly want to know? The details of the world I shield you from?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications. Did I want to know about the violence behind those hard-eyed nights, the specifics of how he'd dealt with Thomas Wells, the true nature of the business that occasionally called him away for days at a time? "I want to understand you," I said finally, "not just the parts you choose to show me." Something shifted in his gaze. Surprise, followed by a warmth that made my heart beat faster. He set down his glass and reached across the table, his fingers entwining with mine. "Then ask your questions," he offered. "Tonight I'll answer what I can." It was a concession I hadn't expected, an offering of trust that seemed monumental from a man who guarded himself so carefully. I took a deep breath, choosing my first question with care. "Your family. You mentioned your mother and sister." "Tell me about them." Pain flashed across his face, so raw and unexpected that I nearly withdrew the question. But he tightened his grip on my hand, as if drawing strength from the connection. "My mother died when I was 20, he said, his voice low and controlled despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Cancer. My father had already been gone for years. A rival family's retribution, my sister Sophia." He paused, something dark and dangerous flickering in his expression. "She was taken from us 3 years ago. A kidnapping meant to leverage me. By the time I found her, it was too late." The stark tragedy of it struck me speechless. Whatever I had expected, it wasn't this glimpse into wounds so deep and personal. "I'm so sorry," I whispered, genuinely moved by his loss. "It was after Sophia that I became what I am now," he continued, his gaze fixed on our joined hands. "Before, I had tried to legitimize our family interests, to move away from the legacy my father left. But her death taught me that in this world, only power ensures safety. Only fear guarantees respect." "And now?" I asked softly. "You have power. You have respect. But at what cost?" His eyes met mine, something vulnerable and honest in them that I'd never seen before. Loneliness, he admitted. Isolation. Until you. The simple statement carried more weight than flowery declarations might have. I understood then, with sudden clarity, why he had pursued me, why he had brought me into his world with such determination. I represented something he had lost. Connection, normalcy, perhaps even hope. Is that why you were watching me? I asked, piecing together the puzzle of his interest. Before Thomas? Before the wedding? Alessio's expression shifted, guarded once more. I noticed you 6 months ago at the Symphony fundraiser. You were there with the publishing house contingent. You stood apart from them, watching the performance with such genuine appreciation while they networked and preened. You seemed authentic in a way few people in my world are. I remembered that night, how out of place I'd felt among the executives using the cultural event as a business opportunity. How I'd escaped to a quiet corner to actually listen to the music. So Thomas wasn't the only reason, I concluded. He was the catalyst, Alessio clarified. When I discovered his role in your dismissal, it gave me the opportunity I'd been looking for. A way to approach you that would serve both our interests. And what exactly is your interest in me, Alessio? I pressed, needing to hear it plainly. Beyond protection, beyond ownership, what do you want from me? He released my hand, rising from his chair to move around the table until he stood before me. With deliberate movements, he pulled me to my feet, his hands coming to rest at my waist. Everything, he said simply, his voice low and intense. Your loyalty, your honesty, your passion. I want to be the one you turn to, the one you trust, the one you desire. His grip tightened fractionally. I want to be the center of your world as you've become the center of mine. The raw honesty of his declaration stole my breath. This wasn't just possession or control. It was need, deep and genuine. In that moment, I recognized that Alessio Ricci, for all his power and danger, was as captured by me as I was by him. You already are, I admitted, the truth of it surprising even me. Somewhere in these weeks of living in his orbit, he had indeed become central to my existence, not just through his control of my circumstances, but through the connection that had grown between us, unexpected, but undeniable. His eyes darkened at my words, his control visibly slipping for the first time since I'd known him. One hand moved to the nape of my neck, fingers tangling in my hair as he drew me closer. Tell me to stop, he murmured, his lips hovering inches from mine. If you're not ready, if you're not certain, tell me now. But I was ready, had been ready for longer than I cared to admit. Instead of answering with words, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his in silent permission. The kiss began gently, almost reverently, but quickly transformed as the restraint he'd maintained for weeks shattered. His arms encircled me completely, drawing me against the hard planes of his body with a possessive intensity that made me gasp. I matched his fervor, my hands sliding up his chest to his shoulders, feeling the coiled strength beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Alessio rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. You have no idea how long I've wanted to do that, he confessed, his voice rougher than I'd ever heard it. Why did you wait? I asked, my own voice unsteady. His eyes opened, meeting mine with unexpected vulnerability. Because I needed you to come to me willingly. Not out of obligation or fear or gratitude. His fingers traced the curve of my cheek. I needed it to be real, Emma. The honesty of his answer moved me deeply. For all his talk of ownership, of making me his, Alessio had waited for genuine consent, had valued it above the power he could have wielded. It's real, I assured him, lifting my hand to cover his where it rested against my face. Whatever else this is, whatever brought us here, what I feel for you is real. Relief and desire mingled in his expression as he pulled me back to him, his kiss deeper now, more demanding. My body responded with an eagerness that might have embarrassed me if I hadn't been so completely caught up in the moment, in the feeling of finally being in his arms without restraint. His lips moved from mine to trace the line of my jaw, then down to the sensitive spot where my neck met my shoulder, drawing a soft sound from me that seemed to fuel his passion. His hands explored my body with the same thorough attention he gave to everything that mattered to him, learning what made me gasp, what made me press closer against him. "Tell me you want this," he murmured against my skin. "Tell me you want me. I want you," I breathed, the admission freeing something inside me that had been straining against denial for too long. "I've wanted you since that first night." With a groan that sounded like surrender, Alessio lifted me into his arms, my legs instinctively wrapping around his waist as he carried me from the terrace into the penthouse. Not to my room, I realized as we moved through the hallway, but to his, a space I had never entered before. He laid me on his bed with unexpected gentleness, standing back to look at me with an expression of such raw desire that it stole my breath. Slowly, deliberately, he began to undress, his eyes never leaving mine as each piece of clothing revealed more of his body. Powerful, scarred in places from violence I could only imagine, undeniably beautiful in its masculine strength. When he joined me on the bed, his weight pressing me into the mattress felt like coming home, like the culmination of a journey that had begun the moment he'd whispered, "Pretend I'm your date tonight." What followed was unlike anything I'd experienced before. Intense, consuming, at times almost reverential in its thoroughness. Alessio made love the way he did everything else, with complete focus and absolute determination to excel. He learned my body with painstaking attention, discovering places and touches that made me cry out, that made me arch against him in desperate need. And when we finally came together, the connection transcended the physical, something profound passing between us in those moments of complete vulnerability. I saw Alessio truly unmasked for the first time. The control that defined him in all other aspects of his life surrendered to passion, to the connection between us. Afterward, lying in his arms with my head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected to find in this arrangement. This relationship that had begun as manipulation and evolved into something neither of us could have anticipated. "Stay with me tonight," Alessio murmured against my hair, his arms tightening around me. It wasn't an order, but a request, another small vulnerability from a man who rarely showed weakness. "I'll stay," I promised, pressing a kiss to his chest above his heart. In that moment, in the quiet aftermath of passion, I realized that the lines I'd drawn so carefully had blurred beyond recognition. I was his now, not just in name or circumstance, but in the ways that mattered most. And somehow, against all logic and expectation, he had become mine as well. Morning light filtered through the partially drawn curtains of Alessio's bedroom, casting golden patterns across the sheets tangled around our bodies. I woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, until memories of the previous night flooded back. The dinner, the revelations, the passion that had finally broken through the careful restraint between us. Alessio slept beside me, his features softer in repose than I'd ever seen them. Without the intensity that usually animated his expression, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. A thin scar traced along his collarbone, another crossed his ribs, physical reminders of the dangerous world he inhabited. I resisted the urge to touch them, not wanting to wake him from what might be rare, peaceful sleep. My cautious movement was futile. His eyes opened immediately, dark, and instantly alert. Years of vigilance had clearly trained him to wake at the slightest disturbance. For a heartbeat, tension radiated from him. Then recognition dawned, and his expression softened into something that made my breath catch. "You're still here," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep as he reached to brush hair from my face. "I said I would be," I reminded him, leaning into his touch. "Many people say things they don't mean," he replied, his thumb tracing the curve of my cheek. "Especially to men like me." The simple statement revealed more about his life than hours of explanation might have. The isolation of power, the constant wariness against betrayal, the rarity of genuine connection. In that moment, I understood more clearly why he had pursued me with such determination, why he had created this carefully controlled space for me in his life. "I'm not most people," I said, holding his gaze. "And I don't say things I don't mean." Something like gratitude flickered in his eyes before he pulled me closer, his lips finding mine in a kiss that quickly rekindled the passion of the night before. This time, our lovemaking was slower, more deliberate, as if we were committing every touch, every response to memory. Afterward, as we lay entangled in the sheets, Alessio traced idle patterns on my bare shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "Things will change now," he said. Not a question, but a statement. "Haven't they already?" I asked, watching his face carefully. "Yes, but there are practical considerations." He sat up, the sheet pooling around his waist as he gazed down at me. "Your position is more significant now. There will be increased security, certain expectations." I propped myself up on one elbow. "What kind of expectations?" "Public appearances, family events." His expression tightened momentarily. "Potential scrutiny from rivals." The reminder of the dangerous reality underlying our relationship sent a chill through me, despite the warmth of the bed. "You think I might become a target? It's a possibility I've always considered," he admitted, his hand finding mine and squeezing gently. "Now more than ever, which is why we'll take additional precautions." Before I could question him further, his phone vibrated on the nightstand. Alessio checked the screen, his expression shifting from contentment to sharp focus in an instant. "I need to handle this," he said, already rising from the bed and reaching for his clothes. "We'll continue our discussion later." Just like that, the intimate moment was broken. The man I'd held through the night transformed back into the controlled, dangerous figure I'd first encountered. I watched as he dressed efficiently, his movements precise and economical. At the door, he paused, returning to the bed to press a lingering kiss to my lips. "Don't leave the penthouse today," he instructed, his tone brooking no argument. "I'll be back by evening." After he left, I remained in his bed for a while, processing the swift transition from lover to commander. This was the reality I had accepted. The complexity of loving a man whose life was divided between tenderness and violence, between the warmth he showed me and the coldness required by his position. Eventually, I rose and made my way to my own room to shower and dress for the day. Despite my initial inclination to rebel against Alessio's instruction to remain in the penthouse, a habit of independence that still flared occasionally, something in his tone had conveyed genuine concern rather than mere control. I decided to respect his request, at least until I understood the reason behind it. I spent the morning exploring parts of the penthouse I hadn't fully appreciated before. The extensive library with first editions I'd only dreamed of handling, the state-of-the-art media room, the small but impressive collection of art that reflected taste far more sophisticated than I would have expected. In each space, I discovered touches that revealed more about the private Alessio, the man behind the power and danger. Mid-afternoon, as I was curled in a window seat with a rare edition of poetry I'd found in the library, the penthouse intercom chimed. The security team stationed in the building was requesting permission to allow a visitor up, a woman named Valentina Ricci who claimed to be Alessio's cousin. Curious and slightly apprehensive, I granted permission after confirming with the head of security that she was indeed on the approved visitor list. Minutes later, the elevator doors opened to reveal a striking woman in her early 30s, her resemblance to Alessio unmistakable in the sharp line of her jaw and the intense quality of her dark eyes. "So you're Emma," she said without preamble, assessing me with unnerving thoroughness as she stepped into the foyer. She wore an expertly tailored pantsuit that screamed wealth and influence. Her only jewelry a simple gold wedding band and a watch worth more than my former year's salary. Alessio's new distraction. The word choice was clearly deliberate, designed to establish dominance in our first interaction. I straightened my spine, refusing to be intimidated despite the flutter of nerves in my stomach. "I prefer Emma Sullivan," I replied evenly. "And you must be Valentina." A hint of approval flickered across her features at my response. "He didn't tell me you had spine. That's promising, at least." She moved past me into the living room, her gaze sweeping over the space as if checking for changes since her last visit. With a grace that suggested familiarity, she settled onto one of the leather sofas, gesturing for me to join her. "Alessio doesn't know you're here, does he?" I guessed, taking the seat across from her rather than beside her as her gesture had suggested. Valentina smiled, sharp and knowing. "My cousin is handling an unfortunate situation with the Cannavaro family. He'll be occupied for hours yet." She leaned forward, studying me with unsettling intensity. Which gives us time to get acquainted, don't you think? I think you already know everything about me, I countered, remembering how thoroughly Alessio had investigated me before our first meeting. Family research seems to be a shared trait. She laughed, the sound unexpectedly warm. You're not entirely wrong. I know the facts. Orphaned at 23, scholarship to Northwestern, editor with modest ambitions until my cousin decided you belonged to him. Her expression hardened slightly. What I don't know is whether you understand what you've stepped into. I understand enough, I said carefully. Do you? Valentina raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Do you understand that Alessio hasn't brought a woman to this penthouse in the 3 years since Sophia's death? That the family is watching with particular interest because you're the first person he's shown genuine attachment to since we lost her? The information struck me with surprising force. Alessio had mentioned his sister's death, but not that I was the first woman he'd allowed into his private space since that tragedy. He didn't tell me that, I admitted. Of course he didn't. Valentina's expression softened fractionally. My cousin guards his vulnerabilities carefully, but the fact remains, you're not just another conquest or arrangement, which makes you either extremely valuable or extremely dangerous to our family's interests. The blunt assessment sent a chill through me. I'm not a threat to Alessio or your family. Perhaps not intentionally, she acknowledged, but attachment creates weakness, and weakness creates vulnerability. There are those who would exploit Alessio's feelings for you without hesitation. Is that a threat? I asked, meeting her gaze directly. Valentina studied me for a long moment before her lips curved into a smile that reminded me startlingly of Alessio. No, Emma Sullivan. If anything, it's a warning, and perhaps an offer of alliance. Alliance? I repeated, confused by the sudden shift. Alessio needs someone who sees him clearly. Not just the power or the position, but the man. She spoke with unexpected sincerity. Since Sophia died, he's been harder, colder, more ruthless in ways that concern even those of us who understand the necessities of our world. I remembered the glimpses of vulnerability I'd seen in Alessio, the moments when the carefully maintained control slipped to reveal something wounded beneath. You're saying I'm good for him. I'm saying you might be, she corrected. If you're strong enough to stand beside him without being consumed by his world, if you're smart enough to navigate the complexities of our family, if you're loyal enough to put his interests above your own when necessary. Those are significant ifs, I observed. Yes, she agreed simply, because the stakes are significant. Alessio holds our family together through force of will and strategic brilliance. His position, our position, depends on his judgment remaining unclouded, his decisions uncompromised by emotional vulnerabilities. I understood then that Valentina's visit wasn't merely curiosity about her cousin's new girlfriend. It was an assessment of a potential liability or asset to family interests that extended far beyond personal relationships. What exactly do you want from me? I asked directly. Currently, nothing but understanding. She rose gracefully, moving to the window that overlooked the city. Alessio believes he can keep you separate from certain aspects of our life. I'm here to tell you that such separation is an illusion. By choosing him, you've chosen all of it. The power, yes, but also the danger, the enemies, the hard decisions. The truth of her words settled heavily in my chest. Despite Alessio's careful compartmentalization, the reality of his world would inevitably touch me, reshape my life in ways I was only beginning to comprehend. I didn't choose this life, I said quietly. I chose him. Valentina turned, something like sympathy in her expression. In our world, they're the same thing. She moved back toward me, reaching into her handbag to withdraw a small box. Which is why I brought you this. She placed it in my hand, a velvet case containing what appeared to be an elegant gold bracelet, with a delicate pattern etched into the metal. It's beautiful, I said, confused by the unexpected gift. It's also a tracking device, Valentina explained matter-of-factly. Press this section twice, and it sends an emergency alert to Alessio's security team with your exact location. The range is unlimited. The battery lasts 5 years, and it's waterproof to 50 meters. I stared at the bracelet. The reality of my new life suddenly crystallized in this beautiful object designed for emergencies I didn't want to contemplate. Alessio already tracks my phone, I pointed out. Phones can be taken, Valentina replied with chilling practicality. This is more discreet and more difficult to detect or remove. Wear it always, Emma. Not just for Alessio's peace of mind, but for your own safety. She checked her watch, then moved toward the elevator with the same confident grace with which she'd arrived. At the doors, she paused, turning back to me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. My husband was like you once, she said, her voice softer than it had been throughout our conversation. An outsider who fell in love with one of us. He struggled at first with the realities of our family, but now he's as much Ricci as any of us born to the name. It's possible to build a life in this world, Emma. A good life, even. But it requires strength and adaptability I'm not yet certain you possess. Before I could respond, she added, I hope you prove me wrong, for Alessio's sake, and perhaps for your own. With that enigmatic parting, she was gone, leaving me holding the beautiful, deadly bracelet and contemplating a future far more complex than I had imagined even after weeks in Alessio's orbit. When Alessio returned that evening, I was waiting in the living room, the bracelet on my wrist, my mind filled with questions his cousin's visit had provoked. He entered quietly, fatigue evident in the set of his shoulders, but his expression lightened when he saw me. You're still here, he said, an echo of his morning greeting that suggested the day had reinforced old anxieties about betrayal and abandonment. Where else would I be? I asked, rising to meet him. His eyes caught on the bracelet, recognition flashing across his features. Valentina came to see you. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. She had some interesting perspectives to share about your family, about us. Tension radiated from him as he moved closer, his hand lifting to touch the bracelet with unexpected gentleness. My cousin often takes liberties that aren't hers to take. She was concerned about you, I said carefully, about the potential vulnerability I represent. Alessio's expression hardened. What happened today wasn't about concern. It was about control, establishing the family's presence in what she perceives as my weakness. And am I? I asked quietly. Your weakness? He studied me for a long moment, his eyes dark and unreadable. Then, with deliberate movement, he cupped my face in his hands, his touch conveying more than words could have. You're the first thing I've allowed myself to want, truly want, since Sophia died, he admitted, his voice low and rough with emotion. Does that make you my weakness? Perhaps. But it also makes you my strength, Emma. My reason for caution when I might otherwise be reckless. My reminder that there's more to life than power and vengeance. The raw honesty of his words moved me deeply. I reached up to cover his hands with mine, understanding more clearly the complex man behind the dangerous exterior. A man who had lost everything that mattered to him, who had hardened himself against further loss, yet had still risked opening himself to me. Valentina said I'd either be very good for you or very dangerous, I told him. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My cousin has always had a gift for stating the obvious. His thumbs traced gentle circles on my cheeks. The question is, knowing what you know now, having glimpsed more of my world today, are you still certain about your choice? In that moment, I realized Alessio was offering me an exit, a chance to walk away before I became too deeply entangled in a life I hadn't chosen, with dangers I was only beginning to comprehend. It was perhaps the greatest gift he could give me. This man who took what he wanted and rarely relinquished control. My answer came not in words, but in action. As I rose on tiptoes to press my lips to his, pouring into the kiss all the certainty I felt despite the complexities and dangers ahead. When we finally broke apart, breathless and holding each other close, I whispered the truth that had been growing inside me since that first night at the wedding. I choose you, Alessio. Whatever comes with that choice, whatever your world demands of me, I choose you. The words seemed to break something open in him, relief and desire, and something deeper washing across his features as he pulled me back to him, his kiss fierce and possessive and tender all at once, and as he lifted me into his arms to carry me toward his bedroom, our bedroom now. I understood that while I might have entered his world under false pretenses, what existed between us now was real and powerful enough to face whatever threats his dangerous life might bring. 6 months passed with the swift intensity that seemed to characterize everything in Alessio's orbit. Spring melted into summer, then cooled to autumn, the changing seasons marking my gradual integration into a world I could never have imagined before that fateful wedding night. My role at Pinnacle expanded as Alessio's influence quietly opened doors previously closed to me. I now headed a small imprint focusing on literary translations, a dream position that allowed me to combine my love of literature with the language skills that had previously languished unused. My colleagues maintained a respectful distance, their wariness of my connection to Alessio, creating a professional isolation I might have resented if not for the fulfillment the work itself provided. In public, I became accustomed to the whispers that followed us, the way conversations paused when we entered a room, the careful deference shown to Alessio by people who clearly feared him. I learned to recognize the subtle signs of his business intruding on our evenings, the particular tension in his shoulders when a rival family pushed boundaries, the micro-expressions that passed between him and his security team, the quiet phone calls that drew him away and sometimes kept him absent for days. I never asked directly about these absences, maintaining the careful separation he had established between his criminal activities and our life together. But the boundaries blurred inevitably, as Valentina had warned they would. Twice, our dinner reservations were abruptly canceled when Alessio received information about potential threats. Once, I was rushed from a gallery opening by his security team when surveillance identified members of a rival organization in attendance. And then came the night that shattered any remaining illusion of separation. We had been attending a symphony performance, a rare evening of genuine pleasure for both of us, with Alessio temporarily setting aside business concerns to lose himself in music as I had once observed him capable of doing. The performance had been magnificent, Tchaikovsky's violin concerto bringing tears to my eyes as memories of my own abandoned musical aspirations surfaced. As we exited the concert hall, Alessio's hand warm and solid at the small of my back, I was still half lost in the emotional resonance of the music. Perhaps that's why I didn't immediately notice the sudden tension in his posture, the almost imperceptible signal he sent to the security team surrounding us. "Something's wrong," I whispered, finally registering the change. "Keep walking," he instructed, his voice low and controlled despite the danger he clearly sensed. "The car is 50 meters ahead. Whatever happens, stay with Marco." My heart rate accelerated as I identified Marco, the head of Alessio's security detail, positioning himself closer to my side. The casual evening crowd suddenly seemed threatening, each face a potential enemy, each movement possibly concealing a weapon. We had nearly reached the car when the first shot rang out. Everything happened with disorienting speed. Marco's body slammed into mine, knocking me to the ground and covering me as more shots echoed through the night. Screams erupted around us as concert-goers scattered in panic. Through the chaos, I caught a glimpse of Alessio, not fleeing, but advancing toward the threat, a gun appearing in his hand as if conjured from air. His expression had transformed completely. The cultured man who had held my hand through Tchaikovsky replaced by someone coldly lethal, his movements precise and predatory. 2 of his security team flanked him, while others maintained a protective formation around me. More shots were fired. I couldn't tell from which direction or by whom. Marco was speaking into his communications device, his weight still partially shielding me as he coordinated the response. "Get her out," I heard Alessio command, his voice carrying clearly through the chaos before he disappeared from my view, pursuing someone into the dispersing crowd. Strong hands lifted me, half carrying me to a different vehicle than the one we'd arrived in, a nondescript SUV with bulletproof glass, I would later learn. As the door closed behind me, sealing me into sudden silence, I caught one last glimpse of the scene. Alessio standing over a fallen figure, his gun aimed downward, his face set in an expression I had never seen before, one of absolute merciless resolve. The SUV pulled away with squealing tires, Marco beside me speaking rapid Italian into his comm unit. My ears rang from the gunshots, my breath coming in shallow gasps as shock began to set in. "Alessio," I managed, my voice sounding distant and unfamiliar to my own ears. "He'll be fine," Marco assured me with professional confidence. This wasn't their main force, just a warning, a test of our defenses. Who? I asked, struggling to process what had just happened. Marco's expression closed off slightly. That's for Don Ricci to explain. My job is to get you safely home. Don Ricci. Not Alessio, but his title, his position. The formal address emphasized the divide between the man I loved and the powerful figure others feared, a divide that had momentarily vanished, as I'd watched him move with lethal purpose toward danger rather than away from it. By the time Alessio returned to the penthouse 3 hours later, I had showered and changed. The elegant dress I'd worn to the symphony now stained with dirt, and something darker I didn't want to identify. I sat in the living room, a glass of untouched bourbon on the table before me, my mind replaying the events in fragmented, disturbing flashes. He entered quietly, his own clothes changed, all visible evidence of the violence erased, except for a certain weariness around his eyes. Without speaking, he moved to the bar and poured himself a drink, downing it in one swallow before pouring another and coming to sit across from me. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice gentle despite the tension radiating from him. I shook my head. Physically, no. He nodded, understanding the implication. "I'm sorry you experienced that. It wasn't supposed to touch you. But it did," I said quietly. "And it will again, won't it? This is part of your life. Part of our life now." Alessio didn't insult me with false reassurances. "Yes," he admitted. "Though I've taken steps tonight to ensure nothing like this happens again for a very long time." The cold finality in his tone told me more than explicit details might have about what those steps entailed. I thought of the fallen figure, of Alessio standing over them with that merciless expression. Who were they? I asked, needing to understand despite my fear of the answer. Alessio studied me for a long moment, perhaps weighing how much to reveal, how much I could handle. "The Cannavaro family has been testing boundaries since their patriarch died," he said finally. "Tonight was a message. Not a serious attempt, but a demonstration that they could reach me. Us." "And your response?" I pressed, though part of me didn't want to know. His eyes met mine, dark and unapologetic. "Decisive. The new Cannavaro leadership now understands that any threat to you is a death sentence, carried out without negotiation or mercy." The blunt statement should have horrified me. 6 months earlier, it might have. But tonight, still shaking from the memory of gunshots and chaos, still processing how close we had come to serious harm, I felt only a grim sense of protection in his ruthlessness. "Will it be enough?" I asked. "Yes," he said with absolute certainty. "But this changes things, Emma. The illusion of separation is gone. You've been directly targeted, which means your security must be enhanced. More restrictions," I concluded, resignation settling over me. "More protection," he corrected gently. "I won't cage you, Emma. That was never my intention. But I need you safe, not just for my peace of mind, but because you've become—" He paused, searching for words that seemed to elude him. "Essential," he finished simply. The raw emotion behind the statement caught me off guard. In our months together, Alessio had shown his feelings primarily through actions rather than words, through protection and provision, through the careful way he held me at night, through his consistent prioritization of my happiness within the constraints his life imposed. "I need to show you something," he said after a moment, rising from his seat and extending his hand to me. "Something I should have shared with you sooner." Curious despite my lingering shock, I placed my hand in his, allowing him to lead me toward his private office. A space I'd rarely entered, respecting it as the command center for aspects of his life we still kept partially separate. Inside, he directed me to a chair before moving to a painting on the wall, an original Caravaggio I'd once been stunned to discover. With practiced movements, he swung the frame forward to reveal a concealed safe. After entering a complex combination, he removed a small box and returned to sit beside me. "I acquired this 3 months ago," he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning platinum ring set with a deep blue sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "I've been waiting for the right moment. but tonight has shown me that time is not something to be squandered. My breath caught as understanding dawned. This wasn't just jewelry, but a declaration, a commitment I hadn't dared hope for despite the deepening of our relationship. Emma Sullivan, Alessio continued, his voice low and intent as he removed the ring from its box. From the moment I saw you sitting alone at that wedding, I recognized something in you that called to me, a strength that matched my own, a heart that might understand mine despite the darkness that surrounds it. He took my hand, his thumb brushing across my knuckles in the gesture that had become so familiar. Tonight made me realize that half measures are no longer sufficient. I need you completely mine, not just in private but in the eyes of my world, my family, and the law. Alessio, I whispered, overwhelmed by the intensity of his gaze, of the moment that had emerged from the chaos and violence of the night. I'm not offering you an easy life, he acknowledged, holding the ring poised at the tip of my finger, but I am offering you all of me, the man you've come to know, the power I wield, the protection I can provide, and a love that will never waver, no matter what threats we face. The proposal was quintessentially Alessio, direct, unapologetic, acknowledging both the darkness and the light of what a future with him would entail. Not a fairy tale but a reality, complex and dangerous, but also filled with passion and protection I'd never known before him. Will you marry me, Emma? He asked, the question hanging between us with all its implications. Will you choose this life, choose me? Knowing fully what it means, in that moment, memory flashed back to Valentina's warning months ago. By choosing him, you've chosen all of it. The truth of those words had been demonstrated tonight in terrifying clarity. There would be no partial acceptance, no safe distance from the dangerous reality of Alessio's world. To love him meant embracing all of it. The protection and the danger, the luxury and the violence, the tenderness he showed me, and the ruthlessness he showed his enemies. Yet even with the echoes of gunshots still ringing in my memory, even knowing that tonight's violence was not an aberration, but a glimpse of the reality that occasionally punctuated our life, my answer formed with unexpected certainty. Yes, I said, my voice steadier than I would have expected. I choose you, Alessio, all of you, without reservations. His expression transformed with a joy I'd rarely seen so openly displayed, vulnerability and triumph mingling as he slid the ring onto my finger. The weight of it felt right, a tangible symbol of the commitment we'd just made, of the future we would build together despite the dangers that surrounded us. Alessio pulled me into his arms, his kiss fierce and possessive, a physical manifestation of the vow we'd exchanged. When we finally separated, his forehead resting against mine, his voice was rough with emotion. I'd once believed him incapable of expressing so openly. You are the bravest woman I've ever known, he murmured, his hands framing my face. Braver than those who've spent lifetimes in this world. Not brave, I corrected gently. Just certain that what we have is worth whatever risks come with it. He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his features from dangerous to devastating in its openness. Then we'll face them together, he promised. Whatever comes, Emma, we face it as one. As we sat there in the quiet aftermath of danger and commitment, the sapphire gleaming on my finger catching the light, I knew with absolute clarity that my life had irrevocably changed from the moment Alessio had whispered, "Pretend I'm your date tonight," at that wedding so many months ago. The pretense had long since fallen away, replaced by something real and powerful enough to withstand the threats his world contained. I had entered his life as a vulnerable woman, seeking temporary escape from embarrassment. I would continue in it as his equal partner, his weakness and his strength, his heart and his hope in a world that offered precious little of either. The next morning, as dawn light filtered through the bedroom windows, I woke to find Alessio watching me, his expression open and unguarded in a way few ever witnessed. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly, his fingers tracing the line of my shoulder. I looked at the ring on my finger, remembering the journey that had brought us to this point. The manipulation and power plays that had transformed, against all odds, into genuine love. None, I replied truthfully, reaching up to touch his face. From pretend date to forever, It's not the path I expected, but it's exactly where I'm meant to be. His smile, rare and precious, and meant only for me, was all the confirmation I needed that despite the dangers we would face, despite the unconventional nature of our beginning, we had found something real and lasting in each other's arms. A mafia boss, and the woman who had once sat alone at a wedding. An unlikely pair, perhaps, but bound now by something stronger than fear or power or possession. Bound by choice, by understanding, and by a love that had proven itself capable of surviving in even the darkest of worlds.